Hey there, First Methodist. I've had the opportunity to share about my Rwanda adventures with a few groups, but have heard from others of you that you had hoped to have an opportunity to see some of the pictures and hear some of the ministry stories about how First Methodist is working in Rwanda, Africa. And so I thought I'd take this opportunity to just show you the pictures and tell you some of the stories about the work that we've been doing and about some of the experiences I was able to have on all of our behalf over the last several weeks that I was there. As many of you know, in 1994, a terrible genocide took place in Rwanda. Over a period of 90 days, 1 million people were killed. At the time, there were 8 million people living in the country, a million were now dead, and many, many more. Most, in fact, of the population had been displaced, either as refugees or were on the run, having committed the genocide. The country truly was in terrible disarray. As it happens, that was the same year that I graduated from high school. 10 years after that, I found myself in Rwanda for the first time, just 10 years after this genocide. I can remember going to Rwanda for the first time in that year and discovering a country in which less than 3% of the nation's population had electricity running to their homes. Very few had running water. There were almost no paved roads in the country. While there were some schools that were up and operational, most businesses simply had been shut down or destroyed during the war and genocide that took place there. And the society as a whole was really struggling to put itself back onto its feet. There were two primary agents working in Rwanda at that time. There was, of course, the government, who was working to reestablish law and order and to begin to move society back in a positive direction. And the other group that was working there in force was the church. The church began immediately following the genocide, building schools and putting kids back into educational settings, doing work of reconciliation and healing, providing for homes and health and opportunity for people to begin to receive healing and prayer and support and strengthening following the tremendous losses that almost everyone in the nation had experienced. And so, over the last 20 years, my experience with Rwanda has continued to unfold. And I've watched over the last 20 years as that small nation has done nothing short of miraculous work to experience a complete and total transformation. Certainly, one that's not yet complete. There is a lot of work still to do. But to say that I have seen God work in miraculous ways over the last 20 years would truly be an understatement. With that kind of background and history, I'm excited to share with you some of the work that we've been doing and how it all is unfolding. So, I spent 2 weeks in Rwanda at the end of August and beginning of September in 2023. Many of you know that I helped form an organization here in the US called Rwanda Shines. It's a small nonprofit that helps us to engage with donors in the US who then can use our not for profit to send donations over to Rwanda to invest in the areas that we primarily work in. All of us are volunteers at Rwanda Shines. We just love Bishop Nathan and the people and the work, and we've all had an opportunity to go and to travel and to be there. And so, because of that, basically 100% of all the donations given are able to pass straight through into Rwanda and do work on the ground. The four areas that Rwanda Shines primarily works in is evangelism, church building, education, and health. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about each of those projects and talk about how First Methodist has engaged in some of those, as well as other churches that I've served in and other churches that are supportive of the ministry as a whole, along with individual people who also are supportive and donors and helpful in doing some of this work. Before we can really get to the work, though, the kingdom of God, as my friend Todd Steele says, runs along relational rails, and it really does. In the end, the kingdom of God is about relationships. It's about our relationship with God, and it's about our relationship with the people of God. And for the last 20 years, that primary relationship with whom I have engaged to do work of ministry is, of course, with this guy, Bishop Nathan Amodi. Nathan is the son of a cattle keeper. His parents raised him in the foothills of Uganda. They fled Rwanda in the 1950s under threat of persecution and death. And so his dad raised cattle. His dad was a polygamist. He had four wives. Nathan's mom was one of those. Nathan was one of 25 kids that his dad had. Nathan came to faith when some missionaries rode their bikes up and started singing hymns of faith. It just stirred something in his heart and caused him to want to go to church. And so he became the first in his household to begin to really go to church and take it seriously. And over the years, he just became more engaged and involved in the life of the church. At one point, when he really was without any support, resources, or help, um, he was invited to speak at a church. In fact, the pastor just said, I think God has given a word to someone here. And Nathan was just a teenager, and he stood up and he gave a word that the Lord had been pressing on him. And the next day, there was a Dutch missionary woman who was there, and excuse me, an English missionary lady who was there. And she came to Nathan and said, "The Lord just shared with me that I should sponsor you to go to school and to pursue seminary and to become a pastor." And so that's what he did. And all these years later, he's been a pastor and now is the Bishop of Kigali, which is the capital city in Rwanda. This is him in his office at the diocese there in Kigali. So if you're ever wondering where the bishop sits, this is his office where he works, and so we spent quite a bit of time in there working. This guy's familiar to many of you. This is Nathan's oldest son, Jonathan. Jonathan spent some time staying here with us while he was in medical school. He is a doctor now in Rwanda. He's serving at a NGO, a non-governmental organization that helps supervise students who are studying medicine and also coordinates the schedules of visiting professors from US-based medical schools who are coming and doing teaching and training there. Jonathan has two other siblings, Liz, who is in an entrepreneurial business program there in Kigali, and then Joshua, who's just graduated from high school and is making preparations to head off to university. Nathan, of course, is married to Esther, and their family loves the Lord and serves God together. On this last trip, I got to sit down with this lady. This is Bishop Nathan's mom. She just celebrated her 100th birthday this last year and is headed towards 101. So it was great to be able to see her and visit with her a little bit on this last trip. I've often wondered about how my friend Nathan maintains such a positive outlook on life and how he's able to accomplish so much for the Lord. And while I was staying at his house this trip, I poked my head inside of his office. And this is his home office. And you can see that blue rug there on the floor. This is where prayer takes place in the Modi household. Esther spends many hours every single day praying for the ministry, for her kids, for her family, for the people that they support and care about, right there on that rug. And of course, there it is. That's the secret, and that's the power of the ministry that is at work in Nathan and Esther and their family's life, is through the power of prayer, spent hours at a time engaging in that which matters most. So let's get to it. Some of the work of Rwanda Shines. I mentioned first is evangelism. Of course, Jesus said to go into all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. This is called the Great Commission. It is the mission of the church. It is actually the mission of First Methodist Church of Waco. This is what we believe God has called us to do. And so we try to do that in Waco and around the world. Certainly, we were doing that in Rwanda here very recently. At the beginning of my trip, I had the opportunity to attend and preach at an international evangelism convention in the northern province that was being led by our friend Bishop Sam. Bishop Nathan have been friends for a long time. And in fact, I've known Bishop Sam since the two of them were pastors many years ago. And Sam was actually working with the youth in the cathedral of the Kigali Diocese at that time, and he is now the bishop of the Northern Province. There were over 10,000 people in attendance at this evangelism conference that we were able to preach at. This was one of probably a dozen choirs that came and that sang. We've had a choir from Tanzania that was there. We had preachers from Rwanda, from Uganda, and of course from the U.S. That was me. I was one of two white people at the entire convention, which was really something. There was a retired Anglican pastor there from the UK who was doing some teaching on the catechism for the students and for some of the pastors over there. But we had a marvelous time. We were treated to such great worship, and we really praised God pretty heartily for those several days that it went on. We saw several thousand people come forward to make a first-time profession of faith, a decision to follow Jesus Christ at this event. Something happened there that I just was so Rwandese. I just had to grab a picture of it so that I could share it. It's been very hot over there, very dry. It had been about 30 days since it had rained, which is very, very unusual, particularly in the northern province. Because of that, it was dusty. It was really dusty. And the way the conference was set up, there was a main stage, and then there were these big tents kind of all around, and then back behind us as well. And the center section was kept open, of course, for dancing. For people to come forward for prayer or to receive Christ and to dance as the Spirit moved. Every time the people would come and dance, a huge dust cloud would rise up. And so I was watching all of this when this woman came out with a little water can and began very diligently watering the grass to make the dust settle down. And then a few others joined her and would sprinkle the water. And some came out with 5-gallon buckets of water that they would just kind of splash around. They'd pick up their bucket and move and then kind of splash it around. And, I'm this Western mind. I'm like, wow, where's the sprinkler at? And what's the more efficient way? And I was, of course, thinking I would never do this. I would never undertake to do this because it was a large area and it takes such diligence and patience. You got to walk and get the water, you got to come back, you walk, get the water, and you got to come back. It's just such a big task that I would just never even start. But Rwandans are so industrious, so hardworking. You just see it in every aspect of their life and fellowship, and particularly among Christians. That is just part of the culture, is to work hard and to serve. And so through diligence, through the 3 days, they just kept coming and watering the grass, keeping the dust down so that people could dance. Really, just such a beautiful picture of servant leadership in the church. And of course, because they just kept going, eventually, the job got done. And it was pretty neat. Speaking of dancing, this is Bishop Sam and the pastors of his diocese, all up there, who are all dancing and celebrating. This was a special moment that they were all able to share in. This is Bishop Nathan and I in the evening, in one of the evening sessions there at the conference. And in fact, you can see I was so nervous because I'm just a humble pastor. And if you can tell, everybody down the line is wearing the purple shirts of the episcopacy. So they are all bishops and archbishops and retired archbishops. They all of them. And then there's me. Hi. Anyway, they really treated me with such great hospitality. And I really felt their honored guest. It was more than I deserve, and very typical of the Rwandese culture to honor the guest who has come from the farthest to be present with them. So we were doing evangelism, not just at this conference, but throughout. We also were doing church building, which goes hand in hand with evangelism. Of course, Jesus said, I tell you, you're Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Church building was the first thing I ever did with Bishop Nathan. Some of you remember the story of the Mango Tree Church. Nathan, when we first got together, was pastoring at a large church. He had several thousand people in his congregation. And then when I went back the next year, he was up on this kind of desolate hillside at a church whose roof had been blown off during the genocide, whose walls were falling over, and whose property was completely undeveloped. And I thought maybe he had done something wrong. But he explained that in Rwanda, the lead pastor goes to do the hardest thing, which is planting a new church, and that people were having to walk like 2 hours to come to his church. And so he went that much distance in the other direction up to the top of this hill to start a new church, and so that new people could come to faith. And so when I found him that time on one of those early visits, there were 3 mango trees on the property, and Nathan had one of these old traditional drums that they would use. The choir would use, of course, to beat out the drum for the songs, but we would also use as a pulpit that we would set our Bible on. And so the preacher would stand under one of the mango trees, and then the congregation would stand or sit underneath the shade of the other 2 mango trees, which was fine, except that it rains a lot in Rwanda. And so one Sunday, it was raining, and so we prayed, Nathan and I and the church, we prayed to God, and we asked God if he would hold off the rains until noon every Sunday until we could get a church built, a proper church built. And for the next 3 years, we worked on raising the funds to build that church. And not one time did it rain before noon on a Sunday, which is absolutely remarkable. It rains all the time. It's very tropical there at high altitudes. It rains all the time. For 3 years, it did not rain at all on a Sunday before noon, and we always adjourned by noon, which is also rare in Rwanda. You do not get out at noon. They don't care about watching football, and so they just keep singing and dancing and preaching and praying until everyone's exhausted, and then it's over. The day we moved into that church, we had not set the doors or windows in place yet because we didn't have the money, but we had walls and we had a roof. We had a concrete floor. And so we led a parade of the people into that church. We got inside, we declared that the house of God was open, and then the rain started falling for the first time before noon on a Sunday, and it fell in such a torrential way that you could not shout loud enough to be heard over the rain on the tin roof. And of course, I thought it was a disaster, that church is ruined and this big program that we had planned. But no, the people just broke out into corporate song and dance all through the rain, thanking and praising God for his faithfulness to us while we were outside, and now that we were inside and staying dry, that he saw fit to bring the rains. And so really just a great experience. We stopped by the Mango Tree Church. This is what it looks like today. It's really one of the finer churches in Kigali. The whole hillside is transformed. When we started there was no electricity anywhere on this hill. Now, of course, the roads are paved. There's electricity. There's running water. The investment that has been made by the church transformed the whole of that community. To be sincere with you, I'm not sure it's not one of the most posh areas in Kigali now. A lot of expat Rwandans who have made money outside the country have moved back and built homes on this hillside and go to church here at the Mango Tree Church. And so we stopped by. It was great to see some people. We also opened a new parish. We opened a parish in Bienza. This is us opening the parish in Bienza on August 27th, 2023. As you see from the pictures that I'll show you, this church also is not quite finished. It still needs windows, it still needs doors, it still needs finishing. However, it sits about 2.5 hour drive outside of the capital city along some really rough and dirt roads. And because September starts the rainy season, that's when the rains start falling again and then they pick up in intensity. By the time this church would have been finished, it wouldn't have been possible to get out there along the roads. And so the bishop wanted to officially open the parish even before the construction was finished, just to trim and finish out so that people could be worshiping inside of there throughout the rainy season and on forward into the new year as they work to finish it out. To say that it was packed would be an understatement. To say that the people there were excited would be an understatement. The people were so excited to be there, and it's absolutely packed. You can see it was just wall to wall people, and you can hear for yourself their excitement when the bishop declared that the church was open. So I was really privileged to be able to preach at this church to open it. And I could not help but to think about this passage that was just running through my mind. They gathered in such large numbers, there was no room left even outside the door. As you can see from this picture, the people were stacked 5, 6, 10 people deep outside of every door and every window, just craning to look and to listen to what was happening inside. It was a truly powerful experience that we had there. There had to have been more than 1,000 people on hand that day for the opening of that church. This is one of the choirs that sang. There were two, and this is just one of them. I thought I'd give you just a little taste of the choral singing there. Um, that day, they also did confirmation. You can see here, we had the confirmands come forward. There were 181 that were confirmed here in this particular moment. As you can see, it was everything from kids like 12 to people in their 80s who came having completed their confirmation course and work, their mentorship, ready to profess their faith for the first time in Jesus Christ and become a part of the church. It really was a powerful moment that Bishop Nathan confirmed them. He was confirming them four at a time, and then they would move forward and confirm four more. And it went on for quite a while that way as person after person gave their life to Jesus Christ and became a part of this Christian fellowship. Afterwards, there was a great time of celebration. I know this is going to surprise you, but your pastor did a little dancing while he was in Rwanda. How could you not? If you look really closely, you can tell I was sweating. It was hot. It was hot and dusty, and it was packed full of people. Look at that. And just on out the doorway. Absolutely incredible experience that we got to have. Now, I told you that we confirmed 181, and that's true. We did 181 at once. Before the service started, though, we just learned that there was a bit of a disturbance in the church. There was a family who the husband and wife had divorced, and the son was living with his dad and was attending this church, who had gone through the whole confirmation process, had learned the catechism, had made a decision to join the church, to profess his faith, and to follow Christ. And that morning, his mom, who lives in another part of the country, found out that he was going to join the church and was really furious and came and was raising a major disturbance about it. She did not want her son to join the church. I don't know how much of that was just resentment, anger at her ex-husband, but whatever it was getting played out on her son. And so in Rwanda, a very high regard is placed on the wishes of a mother and father. Honoring parents is just a high cultural value, and so it really had to be sorted out before a decision could be made on what would happen. And so the service got underway. The service started. We were singing, we were dancing, we were confirming all these people. And outside, the family was meeting with some government officials, the local municipal governmental leaders who were on hand to celebrate the opening of this new building in their town. And in the course of the conversation, the young man began to assert himself and simply stated, "Listen, I want to follow Jesus. I want to follow him today. I do not want to wait. This is my church. These are my people. This is the decision of my heart." As I was hearing this being told back to me, I couldn't help but to think of when Jesus said, anyone who is not willing to leave mother or father or sister or brother, anyone who doesn't hate them on my account, right? Anybody who isn't willing to follow me, even if it means leaving family behind, isn't worthy of following me, which is a hard teaching. And yet, we know that's true, that Jesus has to be our highest value, and that nothing in life or in death, or on earth or above or below, can be allowed to stop us from being a disciple of Jesus Christ. And so, fortunately, the government official who was there um, was able to speak into the situation and essentially tell the mother, "Your son has agency here, and we're going to follow through with his desire at this point." And so word came back into us on the chancel, and that the young man was, in fact, going to be able to be confirmed. And so he came forward by himself, uh, with his father and with one of his aunties, and Bishop Nathan confirmed him into the faith and life of Jesus Christ and the Bienza parish of the church. It was really a powerful moment, one that I will never forget. And so afterwards, I went and sat down next to the young man, and through the help of my interpreter, spent a little time talking to him and just encouraging him, letting him know that he had made a difference in my life, and his choice would make a difference in the lives of many. Because, as it happens, I have the opportunity to preach and teach to thousands of people around the world year after year, and that I would be telling his story, and I'm living up to that promise today. I asked the kid what his name is. His name is Bright, as in the light of Christ shines bright in him. Um, I was able to pray for him, and I hope encourage him in a way that made him feel special. I pointed out to him that when the bishop does confirmation, there's typically 100 or more people that are gathered in front of him, that he never does a confirmation of just one person, because there's just always too many. And that what started out as a hard day and conflict with his mom ended with him being able to stand before the Lord and to receive that one on one blessing of the bishop and the church. And that I believe that because he chose to stand for God, there would not be a day in his life that God would not stand for him. That he stood alone for the Lord, and the Lord would stand for him even when he was alone. So it was just a really, you can tell, moving experience for me. It just still moves me to even think about Bright and to continue in prayer for him and the journey that God has him on. I just won't be surprised about anything that that young man does, given how his faith journey has started. Another song for you. Listen closely and see if you can pick out the tune. Do you hear it? Come now, fount of every blessing. Uh, they sing some of the same hymns, many of the same hymns that we do. In fact, Charles Wesley is probably the most well sung hymnist in the church over there. And so I often recognized the song and was able to sing it in English, even as it was being sung in Kenya, Rwanda. So that was all the Bienza Parish. I wanted to show you this picture as well. This is the Romera Parish. Many of you remember in March of 2020, Bishop Nathan was here scheduled to preach, and COVID hit, and we received a shelter in place order. The very first Sunday of that shelter in place, we recorded Bishop Nathan. We brought him into the sanctuary and had him preaching out live to you, as a matter of fact, that day. That was our very first Sunday of COVID. And at the end of that time, I told you that before this thing had happened, we had planned to raise money to help finish some parish churches that Nathan had that needed work. In fact, there were 5 big parishes that each needed about $10,000 to finish work and to be able to open in order to meet code in the city and to allow people to begin worshiping inside. And the Romero Parish was one of those that we helped give a final push to. And I told you at the time, like, I don't know if this is a good idea or not. I don't know how long we're going to be closed, a week, 2 weeks, how long the pandemic would go on, and how the money would be. And maybe it was foolish to take up a special offering to do work around the world, but we felt like God knew it was coming and this was the plan. And so we went with it. You gave us $50,000 that we sent over there to Nathan in the middle of the pandemic, and he was able to use it to help so many churches. And anyway, this is one of the great parishes in Kigali. This is the Romero Parish. And this is what it looks like from the balcony, kind of looking down inside, and then from up at the chancel looking back out, you can see what it looks like. Just a close-in view here of the chairs up in the mezzanine, the balcony was really great, a lot of fun. I met this guy. This is James. He is the chairman of the Fathers Union of the Romero Parish. He's a faithful businessman. He helps run some of the commercial parts of the church business and life, and just was a great guy. I really enjoyed getting to know him. He is a mover for the Lord. I'll just tell you that right now. And I'm going to come back and talk more about him later. One of the things I was able to do while I was there was I did a 2-day teaching seminar for the Fathers Union, and heard more about their work and what they're trying to do to help promote the values of fatherhood and being a faithful, good husband, empowering men to provide more leadership in the life of the church. It's a really, really important thing right now. As you can imagine, in 1994, because of genocide, the war, a lot of the men had died. The society was heavily female because men had died and or were in prison or were, had fled the country. And so, today there's 14 million people, so 7 million more. The population has doubled in the last 30 years. So more than half of the population is under the age of 30 in Rwanda right now. And so they're having to teach young men how to be men because there are not a lot of old men to teach them that. And so that's one of the big projects the Father Units one we're very interested in. And I'll talk more about that towards the end here when I talk about our 2024 priorities working in Rwanda. So another church that we worked in was St. Etienne's. This is the cathedral church in the capital city of Kigali. I preached there. It was also packed. There were chairs out on the patio. Not surprisingly, I danced here too. Anytime I danced, the cameras from the people were in evidence if they had them. I think I was a bit of a spectacle, but in a positive way. The dancing Mazungu pastor. This is the cathedral. It's 55 years old. It's one of the oldest, most historic buildings in Kigali, which is great, except that it's too small for its purpose. It's outdated, and frankly, it needs to be rebuilt. But because it's historic, the government wants to preserve the integrity of the aesthetics of the building. So it's not as simple as just building what works best. It's going to have to be rebuilding in the same site on a larger scale, and it's going to cost quite a bit of money. But this is what it looks like from the back looking to the front, and this is what it looks like from the front looking to the back. You can tell there's no balcony. This is the processional of us coming in, and you'll get an idea of exactly how crowded it is on any given Sunday morning. This is one of 3 services that happens on Sunday there. The services run almost back to back from about 8:30 in the morning until 7 o'clock at night. Um, you can see here, this was during children's time. You can't see, but there's probably 100 children up here on the chancel with us. And then you can see everybody just packed in as tightly as they can go. This again, just more dancing. This was Nathan. He thinks it's great. He doesn't dance anymore because he had to have surgery on his back. He has some moves, but he doesn't bounce. So he always goes like this when the dancing starts. Tells me to go dance with his people. This is the project that Nathan's working on right now. This is going to be the new cathedral building that he hopes to build. He hopes to begin construction next February and complete it by like October, November of next year. This will be his largest, most expensive project that he's ever undertaken. It will cost somewhere around $700,000 US. It will hold about 1,500 people when it's completed. This is the dean of the cathedral. Nathan's not able to be in the cathedral, but once every month or 6 weeks or so because he's traveling around to all his churches. And so this is kind of the senior pastor of the cathedral. His name is Elisha. Elisha and I have had our paths crossed, but we've never really spent time together. We discovered, we've kind of crisscrossed each other, but never really knew each other until this trip. Really a great and dynamic leader. His parents, his ancestral home is in Gehini, which is Gehini is the site of the East African revival. Think African equivalent of the Great Awakenings that took place in the United States. His parents were saved in the East African revival of the late 1930s, early 1940s. His dad became a lay minister in the church. But they, like Nathan's family, had to flee out of Rwanda in the late 1950s, early 1960s because of the run-up to genocide, because of the ethnic cleansings that were starting to take place. But he grew up in a faithful household, had a call to ministry, went into ministry, and in 1995, just 1 year after the genocide ended, heard the call to come home and help begin rebuilding the nation. And so he did. A nation that was in turmoil and disarray, with literally dead bodies just still unburied. He came home and he began teaching in a school and helping to build a school and pastor a church. And he's been doing that ever since. Today, he's also the continent director for Hope International, which is a nonprofit that works in Rwanda and really all over Africa. He is a dynamic and powerful leader, and hope to have him over to the U.S. in 2024. Another great leader that I met that I also hope to invite over next year when Nathan comes is this guy. This is Ben Michael. Ben Michael's a successful businessman. He runs a company called Greenleaf Motors. They're an importer of Mitsubishi Motors in Rwanda. He also has calling in his life to ministry, one that he had when he was young, when he was in school with Nathan, but one that got delayed as he pursued business, but that through a powerful experience of God in a hospital with COVID, near death, he heard God speak to him again and reminded him that his calling does not expire. And so he got out of the hospital, went back to school, got his divinity degree, and was ordained in the church and serves also in the cathedral with Bishop Nathan, Elisha, and that great team there. So those are some of the team there at the cathedral that hopefully you'll get a chance to meet next year. As some of you know, I put it up on Facebook that our church had about $20,000 for a project to do in Rwanda. I let Nathan know that we had that money and that we were happy to put it wherever it would do the most amount of good. Whatever project he felt like at the time it would do the most good in. Well, he told me about this place and this pastor. You see, there is an area between the capital and the northern province, which are two majorly developed areas that Nathan oversees, where there really are no churches. Not just none from his church, but no churches of almost any denomination. And there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who live in that area where there really is no church. And frankly, there's not a lot of infrastructure at all. It's a very underdeveloped part of the country. And so they had gotten this far on the church. Nathan is paying rent for this pastor, Anastasia, to live and to start trying to get a church started. He's got about 20, 25 people going regularly. And Nathan has set him up to be kind of the archdeacon of all the hills. His plan is to start with this one parish, open it up, get a church rooted there, and then use it as a base station to plant another dozen to 20 churches on all the hills all around. Uh, so I think we wired the church. I wrote in and asked the church to go ahead and wire the money over. Lauren in our business office wired the money over like on a Tuesday, and I got this picture on a Friday. Uh, I promise you, this building is done because it's been 2 weeks now. It has a roof on it, and no doubt by now they've started on the pastor's parsonage, which will also be on the site. That $20,000 will finish that entire church and build a parsonage that the pastor will live in with his family and do ministry out of on a daily basis. There's no power, electricity, or water up on this hill, but I'm confident that because the church has made the investment here, the government will now have pressure to drag those utilities up there to this place and allow for all the other homes that are up there, all the hundreds of people living on this hill, to be able to begin to access electricity and running water. So it's a really powerful thing. In a very real sense, a small gift is going to transform this area of Rwanda. You can see they were meeting under a little tent. They won't be doing that anymore. And all those hills that you see in the background, in very short order, over the next 5 to 7 years, will be dotted with churches that hundreds, if not thousands, of people are attending on a weekly basis. All right, so that's some church building. How about education? Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it. Star School is one of our older projects that we've been working on for about 15 years now. When we started, it was just a barren field on an empty hillside. Once again, the hillside has been transformed primarily because Nathan made it a place that people wanted to live, because there is high quality education available for people of any economic level. And that's because of sponsorships that take place at the Star School. The Star School's mission is to bring up God-fearing children who are excelling in their disciplines and academics. It features a nursery and a primary care school. You see the little nursery and primary school there with the playground. It has an elementary school, and it goes all the way up to secondary school that includes dormitories where about 350 students in the high school level will board there throughout the course of the year. There's a soccer pitch for playing. There's a basketball spot there where kids can play basketball. As you know, our kids at Vacation Bible School this past year raised money to sponsor kids to go to the Star School. And during that, I told them that Kim and I had bought a cow for the Star School to provide milk for the students as a Christmas gift for my parents one year. And I said they named it Kim the Cow. Just in case you didn't believe me, there's Kim the Cow right there. She's alive and well and still producing milk. You have to feed the body if you're going to feed the mind. Kids are hungry. And so they get a porridge mixture with milk and protein and sorghum every day. But they also are getting fed fruits and vegetables. One of our donor friends at Rwanda Shines provided the money to buy a plot of land to graze the cattle on so that we could get the milk. But also, we're farming that land. And Nathan told me that this past year, Star School was provided about 90% of its own food for its students, which is great. It means that it's a huge savings of expenditure, and also provides the kids with healthy nutrition, and it's sustainable. We're able to do that year in and year out. One of our friends in Gonzales, Nathan and others have been down there, and the pastor there is a good friend of ours. And so some of his parishioners are chicken farmers, and so they met with Nathan, gave him a tour. Nathan was excited, and so they sponsored at the Star School the building of this chicken coop. And these chickens are about 30 days old, and so about 60 more days coming soon. Eggs for everybody. So the kids are going to be able to have eggs in their diet as well now at the Star School because of that. Star School recently in 2020 also purchased another school. It's an urban school that was having some problems. It was struggling, but the facilities were good and there was a density of population there. So that's the CSK school, which is in the urban part of Kigali. Star School in Masaka, in the more what was a more rural area when we started it, has about 1,500 kids or so now, and then the CSK school will have about 500. So all told, about 2,000 students in the Star Schools. Many of you sponsor kids to go to Star School. Kim and I do. We've been sponsoring the same kid since he was in primary school. He's in secondary school now. We'll be looking forward to Pacific's graduation in the years ahead, and then into starting over with another kid and sponsoring them through school. My men's Bible study, Band of Brothers, every week they put money into a little pot. Somebody provides donuts, they put money in, pays for kids to go to Star School. And in fact, about a dozen to 15 kids a year are sponsored through those dollars that those men put in each week as we study. So a lot of people investing in the Star School and the kids there. This is yet another school. This is in the Bienza parish that we opened the church in. This is the little school there. The school is a church school. It goes from just primary and elementary, just primary and elementary, and they have 1,200 students. Almost 300 of them are Compassion International sponsored kids. Um, the next big goal for this school is to build a secondary school, a high school for the kids to go to. Because right now, when they graduate from their elementary school and it's time to go to high school, they have to walk about 4.5 kilometers one way to get to the nearest government secondary school. And so there's hope to be able to build a secondary school block here so that those 1,200 students, as they graduate, don't have to go so far walking on those roads and in that rain that makes the roads impassable for cars, but instead can stay more locally there in their own community. You can just see here on the walls of the schools some of the educational principles get written, the mission, the vision, the values, competence, punctuality, patriotism, hardworking, welfare, optimism, good behavior. Their motto, education, is competence, vision, all of that kind of stuff. Listen to the mission: ensure that students acquire the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to be productive Rwandan. Uh, Man, honestly, would that all of our schools in our country adopt some of these things too. You can see also they just put up general education skills on the walls. They're painted. Muralists come and paint. These are the organ systems in the body. This is a close up of the human heart and the different pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, left atrium, aorta, all the parts right up there. A typical leaf, veins, and midrib, and all these parts. This is their continent with all their countries and the borders so that they can learn about the geography. It's not all just painting on walls. This is in that CSK second campus of the Star School. This is the IT classroom where they have the opportunity to go and to get online and learn about how to do research on the internet and how to engage the broader world through online portals. You can see a really durably constructed laptop that has just particular portals and apps that the kids can get into to work in. One final thing I just thought I'd show you. In 2018, Kim and I were in Rwanda. That's the last time I was actually there. And we planted this little tree in Davis's honor at the Star School. Well, I visited that tree, and there it is today. I share that because this is a metaphor for my experience in Rwanda. Uh, you plant a little seed, uh, and let it water and let the Lord do His work, and it grows into this just incredible thing. That has been how my experience of all the work I've ever done in Rwanda has been. Um, just a little push here, a little investment there, some help in this other area, and the people just take off, and things just explode with the anointing of God, and they grow beyond anything I could have ever imagine. It's really been an incredible journey there, and I can't recommend higher to donors who are looking for a place to do the most amount of good with their donations. This is a great way to do it. Our fourth area of focus is health. For I will restore health to you, and your wounds I will heal, declares the Lord, because they have called you an outcast. Um, of the many areas in Rwanda that need a big push, I would say healthcare is one of them. There's 14 million people in the country. There are 3,000 doctors on the registry of MDs. Now, not all of them are practicing. I can just tell you that right now. Not all of them practicing. But even if there were, that would make one doctor for almost every 5,000 people in the country. That's an impossible statistic to kind of get your head around. Um, of those 3,000 doctors, only 850 are specialists. So the rest are just kind of GPs, general practitioners with no additional training, residencies, fellowships, anything like that, um, which is really stunning. It's a big deficit, an area that needs a lot of work. The government is working on it. They are building buildings and investing in infrastructure. This is one of the oldest downtown hospitals, Sehashka, and it's tough. I mean, I'll just tell you right now, walking through there is tough. The wait times are legion. I mean, you step over top of people. Not unusual to have more than one patient per bed in this hospital. It has been like that for 20 years. 20 years ago, we visited this hospital. It was the same way. A lot of people go there. The facility is outdated and it needs to be retired, and it's being retired on the Masaka Hill where we built the Star School, right above us. The government is investing in a multi tens of $1 million brand new hospital that will take the place of this one. That will include a heart institute and a cancer institute that will replace kind of outdated facilities like the one that you're seeing here. We also visited King Faisal. King Faisal is kind of the hospital of last resort in the country. If they can't help you anywhere else, you get referred up to King Faisal. King Faisal has one of the three MRI machines and one of the two operable MRI machines in the country. You got that right. There's only two functioning MRIs for 14 million people in the country. However, they are making strides. They are working on it. This is what King Faisal room in the new wing looks like today. This is what it used to look like. This is what a hospital room used to look like. In fact, just in 2018, this is what a hospital room looked like before one of our friends and investors helped us to construct an entire hospital in the Cyangugu district. Now, this is what a hospital room looks like today. Not all of them, but some of them. So great improvements are being made. This is the Kibagora Hospital. It is also one of the three major referral hospitals in the country that receives people in, not just that come in on their own, but also get referred in from all the rural health districts in the country. If they can't be treated elsewhere, they come here. This is a really great facility. We met with the leadership at all of these hospitals. This one is a militarily run hospital. It is run by a general. However, 80% of the patients are civilians. So only 20% are military patients, 80% are civilians, but it's militarily run. Uh, that is in evidence. It is run very well. You can tell that there is a lot of discipline, there is a lot of order, there is a lot of attention to detail. They also have a massive patient population. They receive 400 to 500 patients per day coming into this hospital. This is the accident and emergency building. This is a surgical ward. This is a laboratory. where they do the lab work. And so this hospital is one that we have targeted for one of our projects in 2024 that we're excited about working with them in. One of the things that the general who runs the hospital shared with us is knowing the need of healthcare, the government can invest in building new buildings and they can try to buy equipment. Although the equipment is hugely expensive, it's hard to come by. As some of you know, a few years ago, Providence Hospital donated hospital beds that we loaded up, like hundreds of mechanical hospital beds that we loaded up in shipping containers and shipped over for use in these hospitals. And so they're working on getting equipment. But as he pointed out, you can you can build buildings and buy equipment. You cannot make a doctor. You cannot buy a doctor. It takes 10 years, something 15 years to get a well-trained, qualified doctor in place. And it's going to take a lot of time and effort and investment to do that. And so that's one of the areas of growth and development that we've targeted for next year through First Methodist and through Rwanda Shines. A couple other just quick pictures that I thought were interesting sites that you might be interested in. This was at the Bienza Parish. This again, when you're in the rural area, this is what the facilities look like. So as they say there, short calls only, Pastor. So I understood what they meant after they showed me. This was an example of upcycling that I saw in Rwanda. If you look closely, those are Heineken beer bottles that someone has salvaged out of the recycle bin, I guess, and upcycled them into a border for their little garden where they're growing their fruits. I was mortified to discover that fast food has arrived in Rwanda and that it's Kentucky Fried Chicken. I don't know why that freaks me out, but it just does. They even have delivery available with their little motorcycle there. Nathan said he's not sure if it's really going to make it, and because people don't understand the concept of takeaway. This is a picture of Paul Kagame. He's the president of the country. Paul Kagame was a soldier trained at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. And during the genocide, he raised an army of expatriates in Uganda, trained them, and then swept through the country, liberating it, and would go on to become president and has been leading his country ever since. He is a force of nature. He is their George Washington, their liberator, and their organizer. And he really has, by force of will, in many ways, shaped the destiny of this nation and has seen to it that law and order are the rule of the country. And, truthfully, Rwanda is one of, if not the single safest nations in Africa for anyone to be able to travel in, to be in. I would walk in downtown Kigali in the middle of the night and feel safer than in downtown Houston or Fort Worth. This is me with Bishop Nathan, and that's Archbishop Emmanuel Colini. Emmanuel Colini was the Archbishop of Rwanda, my first ever visit to Rwanda, and it was really good to reconnect and visit with him. He has since retired. Well, that concludes our little slideshow here, and kind of an overview of what I was doing. I do want to just share with you kind of what we're thinking for 2024. Three things. First of all, it is my intent to bring Bishop Nathan and a couple of his English-speaking preachers from the cathedral over with him in April, the month of April. Easter next year is the last Sunday in March. My intent is to bring them over in the month of April and to help them find churches and pulpits to preach in during that month that would be willing to have him and have one of them come and preach and take up a special love offering to help fund the completion of the Kigali Cathedral. I have already extended the pulpit of First Methodist at each of our campuses to one of those preachers, and so we will have a Sunday in April where all of our pulpits will be filled with Rwandans. Perhaps we'll prevail upon our friends to do a luncheon, and we'll also take up a special love offering to collect as much as we can to help push that along. We'll also be inviting some other church friends, friends at other churches, to do the same that month. Hope to have a number of churches throughout that month, inviting them over. Then next fall, we are planning a surgical mission trip. We've got a number of surgeons who are committed to going in the fall. We're working on nailing down the dates for that trip, where we believe they will be doing a week of surgery and teaching, training other doctors at that military hospital in Kibagura. Those will be specialists who can both help clear some backlog of cases, but truthfully, more importantly, do teaching and training alongside of their Rwandan counterparts, and hopefully also be able to get some people in the medical field to help contribute some equipment and things that will help provide a sustained and lasting investment over there. It is my hope as well that we would have some surgical nurses who would be able to go. Surgical nursing is not a training subspecialty in Rwanda. And so the general was very interested in any surgical nurses who would be able to come and serve. So we're going to be working on putting some specialists together to do that trip. At the same time, there's two other projects that Nathan and I are interested in doing. One is hosting a national gathering of the Fathers Union. I mentioned the Fathers Union earlier in this little broadcast. It is an organization helping men fulfill their calling as husband and father. Kind of think Promise Keeper type gathering of inviting men, teaching, training, equipping, calling, praying, and sending them to do that. And so we're hoping to sponsor that kind of conference in Kigali for men. It would be a multi-day conference, probably in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $30,000 to sponsor that event. That's for lodging, for feeding, for traveling, for speakers, for paying for all the equipment and everything, for several thousand men to be able to come together, leaders from across the country. And then on the next weekend, we want to sponsor a youth and young adult evangelism conference up in the northern province. It will be the same format as the one that we did for everyone, but this time it will be targeting youth and young people. Bishop Sam believes that we could have as many as 15 to 20,000 young people come to that kind of convention. And again, the budget will be about the same for that one. We're thinking something around $30,000 would be able to sponsor that. So we're going to actually be looking for an additional sponsor who might be interested in providing for that to take place. My hope is that all of that can be coordinated together so that we can take a ministry team of men who can go and do ministry on the front end with the men while the surgeons are in the hospital, and then on the back end, travel up to Musanze with some youth and young people, young adults, to do ministry there. And of course, people who are interested in ministry in any and all of those different areas. And then, of course, if there are others who are interested in going and seeing and working in the schools, seeing how that works in health, in education, in evangelism, in church building, we'd love to be able to have the opportunity to take as many of those folks as are interested that would like to go. So really pretty a big trip. It's not an inexpensive one. And so in addition to raising money for sponsoring some of these activities and work, we'll also be inviting people to consider sponsoring someone to go if they don't want to go themselves. So a lot going on. Of course, not all of that comes just out of First Methodist. We have a lot of ministry partners who we hope to be able to engage in this great work. But of course, I do hope that our church will play a major, significant role in providing the manpower behind all of this great work in 2024. Whew. So, as you can see, it was an incredible 2 weeks. Not only kind of looking at the work that's been done over the last 5 years, doing some donor due diligence, checking in to make sure that all the investments have borne out, that it's all accounted for, and it is. But also just encouraging and sharing the love and peace of Christ, representing First Methodist over there to the people and to the churches, but also of praying and planning, looking forward to what comes next for the church and what comes next in ministry. And so, wonderful time of review and reflection of how God has been working, is working, and how we see Him leading us to work as we move forward in the future. The last thing I want to say to you is thanks. I could not go if it was not for the church. And I don't go alone when I go. Even though I was by myself on this trip, and it was the first time I've done that in many years that I've been by myself, I, I'm not by myself. You are with me. It is because of your generosity, it's because of your faithfulness, it's because of your earnest zeal for making disciples of all the nations that I am able to represent you and to extend the reach and ministry of this church halfway around the world to some of the least, most underserved people on God's planet. And so I'm very grateful to you. And I want to say that. Thank you. Thank you for sending me, for supporting it. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your giving. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for praying for my family while I was gone and for loving on them. And thank you for praying about maybe going with me on this next trip. I know that we would love to have you. If that's something that you're interested in, we'll begin collecting names in the new year of those who might be interested in going. And so I'll look forward to hearing from you. Again, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. I hope it was a blessing for you. And I look forward to talking to you more about it in the days ahead. God bless you, and God bless First Methodist Waco, and God bless Rwanda.